Welcome to the Catalyst Sale podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales, but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder, CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with the co-founder of Catalyst Sale, Mike Simmons. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Jody.
Mike, we've got an exciting guest this week. I look forward to this talk. We're going to talk to Mike Sarraille. He's a retired Navy SEAL and the CEO of EF Overwatch. Now, tell us a little bit about EF Overwatch and why you decided Mike would be a great fit for this show.
Well, hopefully when I say this, Mike will say that I'm on point, and what he'll do is he'll clarify some of the things that I missed. But EF Overwatch is focused on helping special forces operators and combat aviators make the transition from public sector into the private sector. We know that we have challenges out here in the private sector when it comes to leadership. People don't leave organizations, they leave bad managers. I think having this leadership experience that comes from folks who've gone through this roles is extremely important. And it's a great opportunity for us to take advantage of the practical skills and practical capabilities that they've learned over time. So, Mike, can you give us a little bit of background on EF Overwatch, and thanks again for being able to join us today.
Hey, Mike, Jody, I'm extremely excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. And yes, Mike, you were completely on point. This process for me started originally with a nonprofit I started called Vetted, or the Vetted Foundation, here in Austin, Texas, in partnership with UT, University of Texas, and Texas A&M, as well as Wharton out in Pennsylvania. And basically, it was developing a middle market solution to prepare veterans for successful careers in the mid to upper level management positions in the private sector. We conducted a lot of research, and it was a long tail operation. But out of that came something called the Veteran Accelerated Management Program, which is 7 months in duration. The first 5 months are online through Wharton, and then 2 months in-house at one of our aligned MBA programs. And the results have been just through the roof. We couldn't have expected the metrics that we received even with the first pilot program. But from that, having served with Jocko and Leif Baden at SEAL Team 3, I saw an opportunity based off of what they were doing in the leadership consulting realm to really combine a talent acquisition firm with Echelon Front and not only train leaders within organizations, but source leaders into those organizations to reinforce what we're teaching.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but just here on the front end, where can people find out more about what EF Overwatch is doing?
Great question. You can go to EF Overwatch, all one word, .com, or you can find us through the Echelon Front website as well, which is echelonfront.com.
Awesome. So one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the podcast was to talk about leadership. And when you think about leadership experiences, a number of the books that I've read growing up and have looked in ways to apply leadership principles into work come from military stories, whether we're talking about The Art of War or we're talking about a number of the other general strategy books that are out there. How does military experience apply to the private sector, or apply to what we're doing inside corporate America?
It's leadership. Leadership is universal. You show me a successful organization, I'll show you an organization that has strong leaders. You show me a failing organization, I'll show you a textbook example of bad leadership. So it doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's public or private sector, it's all about leadership. And, the joy of being part of the Echelon Front team, combined with Jocko and Leif Baden, what they did with extreme ownership was they created a system. So we all read leadership books nonstop. There's some great books out there. But I think what Jocko and Leif beautifully designed is a palatable, easily executable system that everyone at every level of an organization can understand and use as sort of the foundation for leadership within their organizations. Again, they boiled it down to the essence of what great leadership is. Again, I'm just humbled to be part of that team.
Awesome. And we'll include links to the book and links to Jocko's podcast where he talks about this on various episodes. When you think of leadership, what are some common mistakes that leaders make?
I would boil it down to three things. One, where I see leaders fail is they don't believe. If you take a management position or a leadership position, you need to believe in the organization, one, and two, the mission. And sometimes even in the military, I saw, leaders were just going through the motions. They didn't believe in the organization, or what we call a company man. When somebody calls me a company man, I actually take that as a point of pride, because that means I believe in my organization. And two, they just didn't believe in the mission. And as a leader, if you don't believe in the mission, I can assure you this: your people, your subordinates, are not going to believe in the mission. The second is ego. Ego will kill any organization, and it is the number one downfall of any leader. And we all struggle with our ego. But that is probably one of the prime examples we see where leaders fail. Coming from the SEAL community, we fired leaders, and it's not because they didn't know how to fire their gun. It's not because they weren't physically fit. It's not because they didn't understand the tactics. It was because they had ego. And when you can't do a brutally self-honest assessment, where you can't even listen to other people, you can't listen to your subordinates, your peers, and especially your boss. So ego kills organizations. And then both those lead into what we call extreme ownership, as you mentioned. And that is just the belief that, you own everything in your world, that there is nothing that takes you by surprise. You own all the outcomes, you own all the problems, you own all the successes. And of course, naturally, as leaders, when our organizations are successful and you're an egoless leader, you pass that success down to your people.
And I can tell you this, my two biggest downfalls over my career, as I look back and as I reflect on things, the majority of mistakes I've made or areas where I've gotten myself sideways have been related to ego or loyalty. Those are the two biggest ones. And I continue to work on them. And I think we all do. So ego and loyalty, which actually kind of tied to the first piece, those first two that you were talking about, ego and the second one, and then the loyalty to the mission, belief in the mission. Sometimes you just get stuck in that over a long period of time. When you think of ways that you can address this, so as a leader, how do I check myself to determine if I have to work on the alignment with the mission, if I have to work on ego, or if I have to work on extreme ownership, or which of those three areas I need to focus on first or focus more attention to?
It starts with humility, the ability to check your ego, to look in the mirror and realize that, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so if you can do that, if you can do a brutally self-honest assessment, you can realign yourself to make sure that you are, one, loyal and believe in the organization, and that you're doing what's right so that the organization and your team as a whole can lead and win. The biggest example we get, or the questions we get from our clients, is, what do I do when I have a bad boss? And again, it's put your ego in check and maintain that loyalty to your boss, maintain that loyalty to your organization, and lead both up and down the chain of command. But I'll tell you one thing about the SEAL community. We had our share of bad leaders, and I could have either complained about it and done nothing, or I can reach out to that leader, develop relationships, continue to build upon, that foundation until we have a solid working organization and we're working together to push that organization forward. So, Mike, at the end of the day, you got to have steadfast humility, and you got to be able to put your ego in check. We all struggle with that, but that is the key to making sure that you're realigned with the organization.
So as you were talking through that, Mike, one of the things that came to mind is this whole idea of leading up inside an organization and leading down inside an organization. And many people think of leadership as, hey, I'm the leader. I'm the new VP of sales inside the organization. What I say goes. And some of them may even look at the military and say, well, military is just, you follow chain of command. All you have to do is just tell people what to do and they drop in line and do it. I know that is a false preconceived notion, but can you speak to that a bit and talk about how that bias or that belief is not true in the military?
Yeah, absolutely. That again is one of the worst misconceptions about the military, is that we just follow orders blindly. And that is not the case, especially within the special operations community. We try to screen for the best and the brightest. Special operations community is very good at acquiring the right talent and then screening and selecting it into our pipelines. But with that, we have a lot of strong-willed alpha dogs that, come with certain challenges as a leader. And they're extremely smart. They're extremely talented. They're extremely driven. And so when you have a team of 20 Navy SEALs, there is a time to say, no, guys, we're doing this. Just get it done. But that's few and far between. You save those cards. But no, you've got to lead that team, which is full of their own personalities and egos. And you've got to build coalitions. You've got to make them see that you believe in the mission. You've got to walk the line. If you're going to preach, you've got to be able to follow it up with action. It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. So with any organization, you've got to build those relationships with people. And when you build those relationships, you'll get that credibility as well.
Awesome. So as you think about this transition and you're taking, as I think about it, there are many opportunities where people who are in the military, they go through leadership training and they don't just come out as great leaders, but they get an opportunity to do the reps in theater and apply practical application of skills. Can you talk about leadership development and the importance of practical application of skills and doing the work and learning over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've probably heard me say before, the U.S. military is the preeminent leadership training platform in the world, bar none. I don't think it's up for debate. By the nature of our industry, if you want to become an officer, you go into a 3-month-long officer candidate school. You want to become an enlisted man, you're going through a 3-month boot camp. And so we break you down. We sort of strip you of your individuality and build you up as a team member. So we reinforce all the leadership tenets, the principles that we speak about in extreme ownership to really build you into a team member. Now, in terms of the iterations, yes, you are just thrown into some austere, chaotic, ambiguous environments. And almost in an entrepreneurial spirit, you have to be part of solving those problems and identifying solutions. Every time you pick up a new rank within the military, it seems like you're going to a new leadership school. So we're constantly doubling down on training and really reinforcing a culture of coaching and mentorship, because we don't have in the military what I call a zero-defect mentality. People are going to make mistakes. Again, they are in some of the most austere, unforgiving environments. They are exposed to a lot of elements from being tired to just long work hours. It is a tough environment. People are going to make mistakes, but we don't come down on them and end careers for making mistakes. We take those opportunities, conduct the after action process to help coach and mentor them and develop them as leaders. You could ask myself, you could pull in Admiral William McRaven or General McChrystal, and they will keep you here all day, literally with examples about how they failed as leaders throughout their career. But because they had great mentors and coaches that helped them learn from those experiences, is really what shaped them into the standout leaders that they became. Same with Jocko, same with Leif. I could give you countless scenarios where I failed as a leader, learned from it, became better, and then reattacked.
Mike, you mentioned AARs. And for those who are out there with acronym soup, after action review, when I think of these, I think of post-mortems. You're going through that process of reviewing the who, what, why, where, when, how of how maybe it was a proposal that failed, or it was a meeting where we didn't get all the information we wanted out of it, or it was an opportunity that we were pretty excited about closing, but we actually lost to a competitor. So I'd like to talk about a couple of these other phrases that apply in both areas based on your experience and what you're seeing in the marketplace. So would you agree AAR is probably synonymous with like a post-mortem?
Yeah, absolutely. After actions are about being a learning organization. It's a lot about knowledge management and retaining the right corporate knowledge. You don't only AAR your failures, but you actually AAR your successes as well. Identifying we succeeded here, we need to do more of that, and this is why it worked. So with the failures, they're usually self-apparent. Basically, you want to identify them, you want to make them known to the organizations, but at the end of the day, you have to identify solutions to the things you identified that went wrong or those missed opportunities, and how to better approach that in the future. So again, it's about innovating and adapting, being a learning organization to continually get better. That is the bottom line. And after action is how do we get better?
Awesome. And we're all out there working inside learning organizations. Or if you're not working inside an organization that's continuing to learn and learn from your experiences, or learn from what the market is telling you, or learn from the areas where you start to push boundaries, then my recommendation would be to go look for another organization. Don't get yourself caught in one of those organizations who just takes that, well, this is the way we've always done it. That's a pet peeve of a phrase of mine that drives me absolutely nuts when people say, well, this is how we've always done it. I'd like to shift into this discussion about onboarding. So this is another one where you bring on a new leader into the organization, or maybe a new member into the teams, and you get into decentralized command and commander's intent. And I'm throwing out a couple of different phrases here, and I want you to run with them and talk about what the onboarding process looks like and how do you provide that coaching so that folks can stretch and experience those opportunities where they can fail, learn, not put people in jeopardy. But how does that onboarding process work and how might it apply to what we do when we bring on new employees into an organization?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. That's a great question. Let me actually move forward in order to move back to your question. So for the audience, you're talking about decentralized command. This is one of the laws of combat within extreme ownership. People love the word decentralized command. And a lot of people in a lot of organizations don't get it. What decentralized command is at the essence of it is that everyone leads at every level of the organization. And in order for people to lead at every level, they have to understand the why they are doing specific things. One, you need to convey what you're asking them to do in a simple, clear, and concise manner. Because if people don't know what you want them to do, I can assure you they will not be able to execute. And then decentralized command is about explaining that why. As you mentioned, the commander's intent, the desired end state. So how that pertains to a team is that when you onboard a new personnel, you just don't explain the why and say, hey, good luck, get out there, start selling to our customers. No. In order to achieve decentralized command, there's a level of training that needs to go into any new onboard, any new team member. They need to understand the standard operating procedures of the organization, the mission, the values. They need to understand why they are doing things and what the standard is within your organization. That takes time to build that relationship. And as they gain your credibility, I almost equate it to a box. When you take on a new person, it's a very tight box until they understand the standard of the organization, the SOPs, and they've built trust and credibility in you. And as they grow, that box starts to loosen up, and you give them more freedom of maneuver to get out there and do their jobs as they gain your trust. It doesn't mean that person is not going to run into obstacles. That's human nature. And you might tighten that box when they run into obstacles. But that is an opportunity, again, much like an after-action process, to reinforce the standard, conduct some remedial training, make them stronger, and eventually that box will loosen back up again. But this is a critical principle to any organization. If you want people leading at every level, you have to take the time to explain why they're doing things.
And when you take it back to the first part of this conversation where we talk about, hey, I've got a bad boss and there's ownership that you can take as an employee in that organization. You can lead from the front lines. You can lead within your team. You can be an active leader. I don't know of too many people who wake up in the morning and say, I want to go to work and do a really bad job. I don't see that happening. I know that there are some people out there who may not go out and do the best job that they can, but I don't see anybody who wakes up and says, I'm just going to go out and half-ass it. So when we think about, and I want to transition this into EF Overwatch mission, when you think about how we can help retired military, special ops folks, combat aviators make that transition into our companies.
This is it's a difficult space to be in, and one that I'm humbled to be able to take on this challenge and really represent the veterans coming out. I'll say that we did choose to focus initially on special operations soldiers and combat aviators because those are our communities. One of your past guests was Dave Berke. He's part of the EF Overwatch team as well. So he understands the combat aviators, and the rest of the team members are special operations members. We understand and we know the attributes, the characteristics, and the mindset of your typical special operations soldier. So we were in a position to best represent them initially. We do have some solutions forthcoming for all veterans, but for now, we chose to focus on those niche markets. It is a rough transition for any veteran making a leap into the private sector. Today, soldiers represent the 1% of our nation, and a lot of people just don't understand the soldiers and what they do coming out. I mean, again, the special operations community and even combat aviation communities are some of the best talent acquisition pipelines in the world. We attract the very best talent coming out of high schools, coming out of Ivy League schools that want to be involved in a very tough challenge and a very tough mission. And that naturally sort of trains them for successful private sector careers. Now, one of the most common things we hear from employers is sort of this fear of lack of industry experience amongst veterans coming out. I would actually counter and say, hey, while that may be true, you will not be able to, replicate the mindset coming out of the special operations community. These guys just know no quit. They're highly emotional intelligent. They're extremely intelligent in their own regard. They were highly vetted and screened to get into these communities. They are primed for successful private sector careers. So Overwatch is not for every business. We are looking for leaders that can think outside of the box, recognize that these special operations soldiers and these combat aviators have a very high level of learning agility. And that right there, learning agility plus the mindset will overcome industry experience any day of the week. With the right mentors and the right coaches within their organizations, these men and women will succeed. And that's why I'm so enthusiastic about representing them and actually getting them into successful private sector careers.
And that's one of the reasons why I think there's such a strong fit inside the startup space. Just think about startup space. You got this entrepreneurial mindset. You need to have learning agility. You need to be very comfortable carrying on multiple roles. You've got to be really comfortable evaluating data, making decisions, taking action. You've got to count on the other members of your team. So when we hire sales professionals, we tend to look for a couple of key attributes or key background areas. It's not necessarily skills, even though they're important. We can coach up on skills and we can train people on skills. But we want to know that people have had an experience in competitive situations, ideally highly competitive situations. So that might be that they played collegiate sports. They may even have played professional sports. Maybe they were active in a band, maybe active in dance, any place where they were in a competitive environment where they can compartmentalize and move on. The other thing we look for is a journalism background, people who are really strong with communication and know that the story is much deeper than the surface level information. Another criteria that I'm going to look at after the conversations I've had with Mike is how can we bring in retired military, because of the experiences they've gone through in theater and being able to emotionally attach, work through detachment from current situations so that they can see the entire playing field. And I know we didn't get into that, so maybe if we could take just a couple of minutes, can you talk about detachment and how that impacts or how important that is to people who are planning, whether in the military or in the private sector?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about emotionally detaching with regards to the ability to prioritize and execute. Prioritizing and executing is about getting the right things done at the right time. Often you see people that don't deal well with stress or being in a information depleted environment, ambiguity. They don't prioritize things well. And hence, when they try to solve problems, they try to solve everything at once. And when you try to solve everything at once, you get nothing done. So, within our young SEALs, regardless if they were a squad leader, a platoon commander, we often reinforce the need during those chaotic situations. And we put them in many chaotic situations to get the iterations in before we went to war. You'd have to get them as a leader to step back off the line to, one, take a breath, two, look around, and then make a call. Dave Berke, one of your past participants on this podcast, talked about the OODA Loop. It's exactly that. But you have to have the ability to relax, as we say, calm is contagious, and make a call. But for a leader who's, in the weeds, really, too involved in one specific problem, they put their blinders on, almost like horse blinders. And it sort of, makes them blind to everything else going on around them. That is not the job of the leader. The job of the leader is to step back off the line and make a call so that the teams can be enabled to get multiple things done.
Awesome. So, Mike, I'd like to hit on this a couple more times. Just where can people find out more about EF Overwatch?
Yes, go to EF. That is E is in Echo, F is in Foxtrot. So EF Overwatch, all one word, .com. You can Google us. We'll come up as a special operations forces and combat aviation talent acquisition firm. We are looking for the right businesses to place these candidates in. We not only have a relationship with the businesses and a duty to make sure that we're pushing the right talent. We also have a duty to represent the veterans and make sure that we're putting them into the right cultures where they're going to be successful. So it's a two-way street. Again, we are not for everyone. We are for organizations with strong leaders that believe in mindset. And again, mindset can overcome any lack of industry experience. You just can't train mindset in a lot of people.
You cannot. I mean, think about it. How many people were using Slack 6 years ago? How many people were using an iPad more than 10 years ago? How many people were, and I bring out these pieces of technology just to say this bias toward they don't have the practical, those skills inside a given industry is false. We are constantly learning how to leverage new technology and open up new industries. So if you feel because someone hasn't sold for 10 years that they can't transition into that role, your biases are getting in the way of your potential success as an organization.
Yeah, you know what, Mike? We just have countless examples where guys have broken into industries and are absolutely getting after it. From private equity to sales to tech, the talent we source. And I would say this, we will not place all special operations soldiers. If they do not have a mindset of extreme ownership, we will not place them. We want to make sure that we're protecting our brand, our legacy. And we have to make sure that, we are sourcing talented, humble leaders into these organizations. But there are too many case examples of where these men and women are succeeding in the private sector, given the right opportunities under the right leadership.
Well, awesome. Mike, is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up here?
No, thank you for the opportunity to wrap with you a little today, and Jody as well. And humbled that you guys invited me. I think, Mike, when you reached out, the fact that, sales is statistically a function that a lot of veterans transition into naturally led me to come on and speak with you.
Awesome. Mike, thanks for the time.
Yeah, Mike, this has been great. This was such a wonderful conversation. If you know someone who would benefit from this information that Mike shared, please share this with a colleague or a friend. You can tag us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn so we can join in your conversation as well. Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.